Hello everyone, welcome back. The next entry was written in Tashilhunpo Hotel in Gyantse again. This was on the 22nd of August 1997, and it says on Sunday, which is the 17th, I guess I hadn't written for a few days. On Sunday the 17th, we did the kora, that is, we walked around the monastery. The Tibetans do this 108 times. They take a few steps, go down on their hands and knees, slide all the way down until the bodies are flat on the ground, get up, take a few more steps, repeat. You can see the grooves in the ground where they have been sliding. They wear pads on their hands and knees. Even little kids do this. We did the kora only once and upright all the way. Then climbed the hill behind the Tashilhunpo Monastery and enjoyed good views of both the monastery and the town. So we were lazy. Went to the PSB. PSB stands for Public Security Bureau, not police something. Sorry about the error in my previous video. Went to the PSB and applied for a permit that included every possible place we could think of, since it cost 50 yuan regardless. Then we bought a bus ticket to Sakya and cashed some traveler's checks. Sakya is very pleasant with many smiling Tibetans. In the morning, Chai, the Singaporean guy from our dorm, made us pancakes. We went to a restaurant and he asked he could use the flour and the eggs and a frying pan. He also taught the restaurant owner how to make them. Then the French girl, also from our dorm, we had a big dorm, made a sign to put over the door of the restaurant that screamed pancake. The next day we went to a nunnery. The nuns were extremely nice and offered us tea and sampa. The latter we politely declined. I didn't want to eat any more sampa, thank you very much. One of them asked me for soap. Yeah, she asked if I had any soap that she could have. So I didn't have any on me, of course, so I went down to the village, bought 2 bars of soap and climbed up to the nunnery again to give it to her. It was quite a climb, but I didn't mind. She was very happy to receive them. Something as simple as soap. The next morning, we came back to Gyantse. Tomorrow, we are off to Gyantse. The next entry was again written in Tenzin, Gyantse, and this was on the 25th of August, 1997. Arrived in Gyantse on the 23rd. The bus ride was comfortable and there were no police checks. This reminded me of something I read in Warwick's letters. There was a police check. I think this might have been on the way to Ali, and he was dragged out of the jeep or of the bus. But let me find that letter and read it to you later.
It wasn't long before someone noticed me, and suddenly the jeep was surrounded by green military men peering through the window, pointing their guns around. My heart was racing and I feared that this was it. I would be sent back, caught red-handed. Suddenly I was awakened into the daze as my locked door was literally kicked in by 2 army or policemen who stormed in, shining torchlights into my eyes as I was dragged out of bed. The only thing I could think of was to show them my passport. I followed them as they took it into another building and showed it to a guy who was sitting up in bed. He flicked through my passport, smiled and said, Odalia, which means Australia. Okay, huh? And promptly fell back asleep. So he had a lot more difficulty than I did because I looked Chinese. In fact, I am Chinese, but Malaysian Chinese.
Met a Chinese couple from Guangzhou who are planning on going to Lhasa via the lake and said that we should share a jeep with them. After checking in at a Chinese hotel, we had dinner at a xiaochi place. Xiaochi is like not a restaurant, maybe like a stall for small snacks. The next day, we visited the monastery. This is the Gyantse monastery. It was a very nice surprise as a Canadian lady had told us that it was not worth going to and the monks were unfriendly, but we found it untrue. The entire structure looked spectacular from the moment we set eyes on it upon entry into the city. As soon as the bus came in and we saw the structure, we saw this monastery, we were impressed. Anyway, it started raining, so we had lunch in a small Tibetan restaurant, noodles and momos. Imagine a very cold place and you have steaming hot noodles and momos. It was heavenly. I don't eat momos anymore because I've given up eating meat. But in those days, I was still eating meat In the evening, we tried to look for the carpet factory, which was recommended by a French couple in Tenzin, but couldn't find it, so we climbed up the fort instead. It was closed, so we couldn't get in, but the view was good and we watched the lovely sunset. It was very romantic. If I was with someone else, not Pin, it would have been better, especially because of what happened that night when he jumped into my bed. Actually, reading back, I cannot believe that I'm still traveling with him. After that, I had a haircut, which cost me 5 yuan, it says here, including wash. Wow, that's cheap. And then we went to look for the Chinese couple. In brackets, I wrote they had looked for us the day before to inform us that they had found a jeep for 500 yuan. But they had gone. They left a note to apologize, but didn't say where they were going. So we came back to Shigatse. Tomorrow we are going to Lhasa, and I'm really excited. Lhasa is like the highlight of my trip. I was looking through York's photos, and he took such beautiful photos. So he was in Tibet in 2019, which is 12 years after I was there. But I could see that certain things haven't changed. Tibet is still very exotic. He took some really nice photos of Shigatse, etc. I will share them with you. But when I was looking through his photos, it made me want to visit Tibet again. Tibet is just so amazing. The next entry was written in Banak Shol Hotel in Lhasa on the 27th of August 1997. So it says here, arrived in Lhasa at 6 p.m. yesterday. The road was good and so was the bus. And in brackets, I wrote much better than a truck. So it was very strange to be on a bus after so many trips on trucks. I didn't even realize there were buses anymore. Talking about trucks and having to hitch a ride, it was so strange because there was no public transport along that route, and everybody had to hitch a ride, not just us, but also the Tibetans. And there was one incident that really stuck in my mind, although I never wrote it down, and it was Tibetans waiting at the roadside with all the luggage and not knowing whether they would get a ride that day, not knowing whether a truck would come by, and not knowing whether the trucks that come by would give them a ride. It was so strange. They would do that all day. And there was one Tibetan man, he was on the roadside. His teenage son was with him. A truck stopped for the father, and the son started crying, and he was hanging on to the father's ankles and begging him not to go. I couldn't understand the words, but it was so sad to see. I don't know what the full story was, but it seemed almost as if the father would never be coming back. Anyway, let me keep reading. So the road was good, and so was the bus, much better than the truck, so it didn't take long. And in brackets, I wrote only one flat tire. So having a flat tire was actually a good thing because there was only one. I don't know how many I had before that. Rather shocked on arrival, as this city looks more Chinese than Tibetan, so we were a little disappointed. So there were Chinese lettering, Chinese characters everywhere, Chinese people, Chinese food. We could hear people speaking Chinese. It was not the Tibet that I was looking forward to. As I said in my last entry, that Lhasa was the highlight of my trip. It was more an anti-climax. I had seen the best of Tibet by the time I reached Lhasa. So you will see that I hardly wrote anything about Lhasa in my diary. But let me continue. Like what I said, fortunately, we have already seen and experienced the real Tibet on the way here. It's not bad here at Banak Shol Hotel. The hotel restaurant, Kailash restaurant, serves chocolate cake. And the hotel does our laundry for free. It was such a good feeling having clean clothes. My daughter was asking me how I managed to travel with 3 sets of clothes. So this is what I explained to her. I had one set that was clean, one set that was semi-clean, which means that I had worn it maybe once or twice before, but it could be worn some more. I had one that was absolutely dirty. I could not wear it anymore, and I would wash it at the next opportunity. And I'm sure I had like little extras on the side, like my wraparound skirt, for example, sitting over here, and I would have a jacket. Unfortunately, I was taken ill yesterday, so I haven't been able to sample the food here. I have intense stomach pain and diarrhea. I'm sure it has something to do with the water I have been drinking along the way. So I think I told you in my last video that I had giardiasis. I'm not sure whether that's the right way to pronounce it. And I didn't know until I had the opportunity to see a doctor much later on. Today I was still weak, but managed to have a hot shower, eat some porridge, and go to the post restaurant. A post restaurant, a lot of my friends ask me what a post restaurant is, so I have looked it up on ChatGPT. A post restaurant is a service provided by postal systems that allows individuals to receive mail at a specific post office rather than having it delivered to a permanent address. It's often used by travelers, people without fixed address, or those temporarily residing in an area. And apparently this service still exists. It was so important in those days because we didn't have mobile phones and there were very few internet cafes, and I think very few people had email addresses. There were 2 letters for me, one from York and one from Craig. I just want to tell you something about York, which is quite interesting. When I first met him, he was studying Chinese in China, and his level of Chinese was about the same as mine. And it was quite funny that a German guy could speak Chinese almost better than a Chinese person. And when we had that Zoom call the other day, he could still speak some Chinese. I was quite pleasantly surprised. So there were 2 letters for me, one from York and one from Craig. If you are watching this, Craig, do say hello in the comment section below. Lhasa is really hot and sunny, not at all what I expected. So I expected it to be cold, but it was cold all the way to Lhasa and then it became warm. Okay, so the next entry is written in Banak Shol Hotel again, in Lhasa, 30th August 1997. Yesterday we went to the bar kora and the jokang. So I don't have any description of the bar kora or the jokang, which is so strange. I think they are the main tourist attractions in Lhasa, and yet I wrote nothing about them, which again proves that I was not there to see things. I didn't even know about Kailash actually until the PSB officer in Ali told me about it. And he was quite disappointed in me. He gave me a good scolding for not knowing about Kailash. I was so embarrassed because I told him I was Buddhist and I didn't know about Kailash. But like I said, I wasn't moving towards anything. I was moving away from something. I wasn't traveling to see. I was traveling not to feel, if that makes sense. Let me continue. Today we went to the Potala Palace. It was okay. Strange thing to say about the Potala Palace. It was okay, but the exterior is more impressive than the interior. Yeah, all those pictures that you see on the internet, they're very impressive. I didn't really like being herded around with groups of tourists, but I met a very nice monk. So you can imagine by then I was so used to being on my own or being the only tourist or one of few, that I wasn't used to being in a big group of tourists. I wasn't used to being in a touristy area. I'm feeling a lot better. My stomach is behaving itself today. I even managed to eat an apple pie. Wow! And that just shows how touristy Lhasa was, because apple pie is such a Western thing. So Lhasa was the highlight of my trip, and I got a huge sense of achievement when I arrived, but I breezed through it so quickly in my diary, and I did not mention much about it. So that's it. I think in the next entry, I will be on my way to Nepal, to Kathmandu. I hope that you will come on my trip to Kathmandu with me next week. Please remember to like, share and subscribe, and see you next week.